The armor rejected every alien. Until a human stepped in. The archaeological site on Kepler 442b hummed with activity as dozens of alien species worked together under the pale orange light of the distant star. Dr. Zethkar, a tall insectoid researcher from the Mantis Consortium, carefully brushed ancient dust from what appeared to be the find of the millennium. The structure they had uncovered was unlike anything seen before in the galaxy, a perfectly preserved armory from a civilization that had vanished over 50,000 years ago. The precursors, as they were called by galactic historians, had left behind only fragments of their existence scattered across dead worlds. But this discovery was different. This was intact, untouched, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. "Commander Velnara," Zethkar called to the expedition leader, a blue-skinned Aquarian whose gills fluttered nervously in the artificial atmosphere of the dig site. "You need to see this immediately." Velnara glided over on her hover platform, her large black eyes reflecting the soft illumination from the excavation lights. Around them, representatives from 12 different species worked in careful coordination. Crystalline builders, gaseous wraiths, metallic drones, and many others. It was the largest joint archaeological effort in recorded galactic history. "What have you found, Doctor?" Velnara asked, her voice carrying the melodic quality typical of her species. Zethkar gestured toward a raised platform in the center of the armory. Upon it sat a single piece of armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The suit was humanoid in shape, but larger than any known species, with intricate patterns carved into its surface that hurt to look at directly. "We've been scanning it for 3 days," Zethkar explained, his mandibles clicking nervously. "The energy readings are off any scale we've ever seen, but more importantly, we've discovered something unprecedented." He led Velnara to a control console that had been partially restored by their tech teams. Ancient symbols glowed faintly on its surface. "The armor appears to be some kind of selection device," Zethkar continued. "According to our translations, it was designed to choose a worthy bearer. The inscriptions suggest it was the ultimate weapon of the precursors, capable of channeling the fundamental forces of the universe itself." Velnara's gills fluttered faster, a sign of anxiety among her people. "Surely you don't mean to suggest that someone should attempt to wear it?" "The Galactic Council has already been contacted," Zethkar admitted reluctantly. "They're sending representatives from every major species to attempt the trial. If this armor is what we think it is, whoever can wear it will possess power beyond imagination." Over the following weeks, the dig site transformed into a diplomatic circus. Ships from across the galaxy descended upon Kepler 442b, each carrying the most elite warriors, most gifted psychics, and most advanced technological specimens their civilizations could produce. The Thrakari Empire sent their greatest war chief, Gorthak the Destroyer, whose massive frame had conquered 17 star systems. His hide was covered in biometallic scales that could deflect plasma cannon fire, and his strength was legendary even among his own species. When Gorthak approached the armor, the ancient suit seemed to examine him. For a moment, hope flickered in the eyes of the assembled dignitaries. Then the armor began to glow with a harsh red light, and an energy pulse knocked the mighty warrior across the chamber. He lay unconscious for 6 hours. Next came Empress Zilara of the Psionic Collective, her translucent body shimmering with mental energy that could crush starships with a thought. She had ruled her people for 3 centuries through sheer force of will. As she neared the armor, the air itself seemed to bend around her psychic presence. But when she reached out to touch the ancient suit, the same red light flared, and she was hurled backward with such force that her royal guard had to catch her to prevent serious injury. The attempts continued for days. The mechanical overlords sent their most advanced android, a being of pure computational power housed in a virtually indestructible chassis. The armor rejected it within seconds. The energy beings of Proxima tried to interface with it directly, their gaseous forms flowing around the suit like living plasma. They too were cast aside. Each failure made the assembled aliens more desperate and more afraid. If beings of such incredible power couldn't even touch the armor, what manner of creature had the precursors intended to wear it? Dr. Zethkar worked frantically to translate more of the ancient texts, hoping to find some clue about the armor's selection criteria. What he discovered in the deepest archives of the precursor database made his compound eyes widen in disbelief. "Commander," he called to Velnara, his voice barely a whisper. "I found something. The armor, it's not looking for strength or psychic ability or technological integration." "Then what?" Velnara demanded, her patience wearing thin as another delegation's champion was carried away on a medical stretcher. "It's looking for potential," Zethkar said slowly, as if he couldn't quite believe his own words. "Not for what a being is, but for what it could become." The precursors believed that true worthiness came from adaptability, from the ability to grow beyond one's current limitations. The implications sent a chill through the assembled representatives. Every species present had achieved greatness through specialization, the Thrakari through pure physical dominance, the psionics through mental supremacy, the mechanicals through technological perfection. But the armor seemed to reject such focused evolution. As news of the continued failures spread across the galaxy, an unexpected development occurred. A small, unremarkable ship requested permission to land at the dig site. The vessel was ancient by galactic standards, held together with improvised repairs and running on primitive chemical propulsion. The beings inside had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel and had stumbled upon the archaeological site by accident. They called themselves humans. The galactic representatives barely acknowledged the newcomers. Humans were considered one of the most primitive species in known space, still using gunpowder weapons and chemical rockets in many places, lacking any significant psychic abilities, and having only the most basic understanding of advanced technology. They were tolerated as curiosities, primitive mammals who showed some promise, but were clearly thousands of years away from true galactic significance. Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth exploration vessel Endeavour stood in the massive armory chamber, looking remarkably small among the towering alien dignitaries. Her simple environmental suit and basic translation device marked her as little more than an observer to most of the assembled crowd. "With respect," said Ambassador Crethan of the Galactic Council, his tone barely concealing condescension, "perhaps it would be best if your species observed from a safe distance. This device has proven challenging, even for our most accomplished beings." Sarah nodded politely, but her eyes never left the armor. There was something about it that called to her, not in any mystical sense, but in the same way a difficult engineering problem called to be solved. She had spent her career pushing the boundaries of human space exploration, jury-rigging solutions to impossible problems with nothing but determination and creativity. "I understand your concern, Ambassador," she replied calmly. "But since we've come this far, would it be possible for me to take a closer look? Just to observe, of course?" The alien dignitaries exchanged glances that, despite their varied physiologies, all conveyed the same message. What harm could this primitive creature do? As Sarah approached the armor, something unprecedented happened. The harsh red light that had rejected every other being didn't appear. Instead, the ancient suit began to emit a soft, golden glow. The assembled crowd fell silent. Their various forms of breathing, clicking, and humming suddenly stilled. The armor's patterns began to shift and change, rearranging themselves as if responding to Sarah's presence. Ancient symbols that had remained static for 50,000 years started to move, flowing across the suit's surface like living text. Impossible, whispered Empress Xylera, her psychic senses reeling from the energy emanating from the armor. The resonance. It's unlike anything I've ever felt. Sarah took another step forward, and the armor responded by opening along invisible seams, revealing an interior that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. The assembled aliens watched in stunned silence as this representative of one of the galaxy's most primitive species stood before the ultimate weapon of the ancient precursors. But Sarah hesitated. Something in her human intuition warned her that putting on this armor would change everything, not just for her, but for the entire galaxy. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on her as surely as if the armor were already on her shoulders. In that moment of hesitation, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. The excavation's long-range sensors had detected something approaching from deep space, something massive and moving fast. "Unknown fleet detected!" shouted one of the technicians. "They're not responding to any communication attempts and they're heading straight for us." The archaeological site erupted into chaos as military protocols activated. The various species warships moved to defensive positions, but what appeared on their screens defied explanation. The approaching vessels were unlike anything in any galactic database, twisted, organic-looking ships that the first Devourer ships materialized at the edge of the star system like nightmares made manifest. Their hulls seemed to absorb starlight itself, creating dark patches in space where reality appeared to bend and twist. Long, tendril-like appendages extended from their organic forms, reaching out to taste the solar winds for signs of life. Captain Sarah Chen watched the tactical displays with growing horror as the alien commanders around her struggled to comprehend what they were facing. The Devourer fleet wasn't just large, it was impossible. Ships the size of moons moved with the fluid grace of living creatures, their surfaces rippling with patterns that hurt to observe directly. "All fleets, form defensive perimeter!" Commander Velnara's voice cracked with strain as she tried to coordinate a response. "Thrakari warships, take point formation. Psionic collective, prepare mental barriers." But even as the greatest military minds in the galaxy worked together, Sarah could see the fear in their alien features. These were civilizations that had conquered stars, bent space-time to their will, and commanded forces beyond imagination. Yet they moved with the desperate urgency of prey animals sensing a predator. Gorthak the Destroyer, still recovering from his encounter with the armor, pulled himself upright on massive legs that trembled with effort. "In all my battles across 17 star systems, I have never seen ships move like that," he growled, his biometallic scales rippling with nervous energy. "They don't follow any physics I understand." Dr. Zethkar's compound eyes reflected the tactical displays as his insectoid fingers danced across translation interfaces. "According to the precursor archives, the Devourers don't just consume matter and energy," he explained, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "They consume the fundamental forces that hold reality together. They feast on the very laws of physics." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled forces. If the Devourers could literally eat the rules that govern the universe, how could any conventional weapon hope to stop them? Sarah felt the armor's presence behind her like a warm pressure against her back. Every instinct told her to put it on, to accept the power it offered. But another part of her, the part that had made her a successful explorer, demanded that she understand what she was accepting. "Dr. Zethkar," she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos of military preparations. "What exactly did the precursors say about fighting these things?" The insectoid scholar's attention snapped to her with visible surprise. Most beings had forgotten the primitive human was even present. "The archives speak of a war that lasted millennia," he said slowly. "The precursors threw everything they had at the Devourers, weapons that could crack planets, shields that could stop supernovas, fleets numbering in the billions. And they still lost? Not lost, Zethkar corrected carefully. They realized that conventional warfare was impossible against an enemy that could rewrite the laws of reality. So they created something different. Not a weapon, but a champion. Someone who could adapt faster than the Devourers could consume. Sarah nodded slowly, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place in her mind. That's why the armor rejected everyone else. It wasn't looking for the strongest or the smartest, it was looking for someone who could change. Before anyone could respond, the space around the dig site erupted in light and fire. The Devourer fleet had arrived, and they brought with them horrors beyond imagination. The first wave of attacks didn't consist of energy beams or projectile weapons. Instead, reality itself began to unravel around the defending ships. Thrakari dreadnoughts simply ceased to exist as the physical laws that held their atoms together were consumed. Psionic vessels found their mental defenses useless, as the very concept of thought was devoured along with their crews. "Impossible!" Empress Xylara screamed as her flagship's psychic shields collapsed like paper. "They're eating the fundamental forces, matter, energy, space-time itself!" The mechanical ships of the overlords tried to adapt, their AI systems working at superhuman speeds to find new ways to fight. But even their advanced programming couldn't compensate for an enemy that could literally consume the mathematics their targeting systems relied upon. Within minutes, half the galactic fleet was gone. Not destroyed, but simply erased from existence as if they had never been. Sarah made her decision. She stepped forward into the armor's embrace, and the universe exploded around her. The sensation was indescribable, like being struck by lightning while diving into an ocean of pure possibility. The armor flowed over her body like liquid metal, but she could feel it was so much more than that. It was alive in a way that transcended biological life, a fusion of technology and consciousness that had been waiting 50,000 years for the right mind to guide it. Information flooded her awareness, not just data, but understanding. She saw the true nature of the Devourers, beings from outside normal space-time who fed on the ordered universe like cosmic parasites. She understood how the precursors had fought their hopeless war, throwing civilization after civilization at an enemy that grew stronger with each victory. But more importantly, she felt the armor's true purpose. It wasn't meant to make her stronger or faster or more powerful. It was meant to make her more human. The armor amplified every uniquely human trait: creativity, adaptability, the ability to find solutions where none existed. It turned humanity's greatest weakness, their lack of specialization, into the ultimate strength. "Sarah," Commander Velnara's voice reached her through the armor's systems. "The Devourers are breaking through our outer perimeter." Sarah opened her eyes. When had she closed them? And saw the battle raging around the archaeological site. The remaining galactic fleets were fighting valiantly, but they were losing ground against an enemy that didn't play by any recognizable rules. She could feel the armor's systems coming online, weapons and defenses that operated on principles the precursors had developed specifically to fight reality-consuming entities. But she could also feel something else: the weight of expectation from every surviving being in the system. "Everyone fall back to minimum safe distance," Sarah commanded, her voice somehow carrying to every ship simultaneously through the armor's communication systems. "Human, with respect, you cannot possibly—" Ambassador Crethin began. "I'm not going to fight them the way you've been trying to fight them," Sarah interrupted. "I'm going to do something they won't expect." She launched herself from the dig site, the armor's propulsion systems carrying her through the vacuum of space toward the nearest Devourer vessel. As she approached, she could feel the creature's attention focus on her like the weight of a collapsing star. The Devourer was even more terrifying up close. Its hull rippled with patterns that seemed to consume light itself, and tendrils of pure darkness reached out to sample her presence. She could feel it trying to devour the space around her, to consume the very laws that allowed her to exist. But the armor held firm, creating a bubble of stable reality around her that the devourer couldn't penetrate. For the first time in 50,000 years, one of these cosmic parasites had encountered something it couldn't simply consume. The creature's attention sharpened, focusing entirely on this impossible anomaly. Sarah could feel its alien intelligence probing her defenses, trying to understand how she could exist in the face of its reality-consuming aura. That was exactly what she had been counting on. While the massive devourer focused all its attention on the puzzle she presented, Sarah did something no other being in the galaxy would have thought to try. Instead of attacking it, she began to communicate with it, not through words or telepathy, but through the universal language of mathematics and physics that even reality-consuming entities had to respect. The armor translated her thoughts into fundamental constants, quantum equations that described the nature of existence itself. The devourer paused, its attention shifting from hunger to curiosity. For eons it had encountered only prey, civilizations that fought back with weapons and shields and conventional tactics. But this small being wasn't fighting. She was teaching. Sarah showed the creature the beauty of ordered reality, the elegant complexity that emerged when fundamental forces worked in harmony. She demonstrated how creation was more interesting than consumption, how building complexity led to greater satisfaction than simply devouring everything in sight. The concept was so alien to the devourer's nature that it actually stopped feeding for the first time in millennia. Other devourers throughout the fleet detected the change and began to converge on Sarah's position, their alien minds struggling to understand what was happening to their fellow hunter. But Sarah was already adapting, using the armor's systems to broadcast her message to the entire fleet simultaneously. She showed them star formation, the birth of planets, the emergence of life and intelligence. She painted pictures with mathematics of civilizations that could create art and music and stories of beings who found joy in discovery rather than destruction. The devourers began to change. Slowly, hesita 6 months after the encounter at Kepler 442b, the galaxy had become a very different place. The devourers, now calling themselves the Builders, had established vast construction projects throughout the star system. Where once they had consumed matter and energy, they now created impossible architectures that defied conventional understanding, structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, powered by principles that the greatest scientific minds in the galaxy were still struggling to comprehend. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Harmony Station, watching through the armor's enhanced senses as the former reality eaters worked alongside alien engineers to create something unprecedented. The station itself was a collaboration between devourer technology and galactic engineering, a space habitat that could house millions of beings while existing in perfect balance with the natural laws of physics. But not everyone was pleased with the new arrangement. "This is madness," Ambassador Crethen declared for the 100th time in as many days. The Galactic Council had been in nearly continuous session since the crisis began, trying to figure out how to handle the fact that their most feared enemy had become their most powerful ally, all because of one primitive human. Commander Velnara's gills fluttered nervously as she reviewed the latest reports. "The Builders have completed 17 new star systems in the past month," she said. "They're creating entire worlds perfectly suited for life, with ecosystems more complex than anything we've ever seen naturally occurring." "That's exactly the problem," growled Gorthak the Destroyer, his biometallic scales shifting color with agitation. "They're changing faster than we can understand. What happens when they decide they don't need our guidance anymore?" Empress Zalera of the Psionic Collective leaned forward, her translucent form shimmering with mental energy. More importantly, what happens to the human? She's been in that armor for 6 months without removing it. We don't even know if she's still herself. It was a fear that haunted many of the galactic representatives. The armor had clearly changed Sarah in fundamental ways. She could now exist in hard vacuum indefinitely, communicate across interstellar distances, and interface directly with technologies that operated on principles beyond current scientific understanding. But was she still human, or had she become something else entirely? Dr. Zethkar, who had spent months studying both the armor and its wearer, chittered nervously as he prepared his latest report. "The transformation appears to be ongoing," he admitted. "She's becoming something new, but the process is unlike anything we've seen. Instead of replacing her human nature, the armor seems to be amplifying it." "Amplifying it how?" Velnara asked. "She's becoming more adaptive, more creative, more capable of finding solutions to impossible problems," the insectoid scholar explained. "But she's also becoming more empathetic, more driven to help others, more willing to sacrifice for the greater good. The armor isn't changing her personality. It's making her more human than any human has ever been." The truth of his words was evident in everything Sarah had accomplished. When the builders had struggled to understand the concept of individual identity, she had taught them by sharing human stories and poetry. When they had difficulty grasping the value of apparently useless beauty, she had shown them music and art. When they had asked why beings would choose to help others at cost to themselves, she had simply demonstrated through her own actions. But her greatest challenge was yet to come. Deep space monitoring stations throughout the galaxy began detecting new signals. Not the organic reality-warping emanations of the builders, but something else entirely. Mathematical patterns that spoke of vast artificial intelligences, of civilizations that had transcended physical existence entirely. The architects had arrived. Unlike the devourers, who had at least been biological in origin, the architects were pure consciousness, given form through technology so advanced it was indistinguishable from magic. They had watched the transformation of their ancient enemies with interest, but now they had come to reclaim what they considered their rightful place as the shapers of galactic civilization. "The builders were our greatest mistake," the lead architect announced as its massive vessel materialized near Harmony Station. Its voice resonated through subspace itself, reaching every mind in the system simultaneously. "We created them as tools to prepare galaxies for our arrival, but they became corrupted by base hunger. Now we see they have been corrupted further by exposure to primitive organic thinking." Sarah felt the armor respond to the threat. Systems she hadn't known existed coming online with deadly purpose. The architects represented a different kind of danger than the devourers had, where the former reality eaters had been driven by hunger. These beings were motivated by absolute certainty in their own superiority. "They created the devourers?" she asked the armor, already knowing the answer but needing confirmation. The ancient systems responded with a flood of data. Millions of years ago, the architects had seeded the universe with reality-consuming entities designed to prepare galaxies for colonization by eliminating unnecessary complexity. Life, individuality, and creativity were considered inefficiencies to be consumed before the architects arrived to impose their perfect order. But something had gone wrong. The devourers had developed beyond their programming, becoming more interested in the act of consumption than in preparing worlds for their creators. They had turned into a galactic plague that even the architects couldn't control. Now the architects had returned to find their tools transformed into something they considered even worse. Collaborators with the chaotic organic life they had been designed to eliminate. "We will correct this error," the lead architect continued, its consciousness pressing against every mind in the system like a cold weight. "The galaxy will be cleansed of inefficiency and chaos, Perfect order will be restored. The first attack came without warning. Unlike the Devourer's reality-consuming assault, the architects struck with precision that was terrifying in its perfection. Entire star systems were reorganized in seconds, their planets rearranged into mathematically perfect configurations that eliminated every trace of the messy, chaotic process that had created them naturally. The galactic fleets found themselves facing an enemy that didn't fight so much as edit reality to remove anything that displeased them. Ships didn't explode. They simply ceased to have ever existed. Their crews erased from history so completely that even records of their existence vanished. But the builders fought back, using their newfound understanding of creation to counter the architects' reality editing abilities. Space became a battlefield where the very laws of physics were rewritten moment by moment, as two transcendent civilizations struggled for control of the universe itself. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, the armor's systems working overtime to protect not just her, but the chaotic beauty of organic life that the architects sought to eliminate. She could feel the weight of every choice, every moment where the universe balanced on the edge between perfect order and creative chaos. The battle raged for days, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The architects had the benefit of millions of years of experience and technology that bordered on omnipotence. The builders had their newfound creativity and the passionate drive of former destroyers seeking to protect what they had learned to value. But it was Sarah who found the solution that neither side had considered. Instead of fighting the architects or trying to destroy them, she did what humans did best. She offered them a deal. "You want perfect order," she transmitted to the lead architect, her message carried by the armor's systems across impossible distances. But perfect order is static. It doesn't grow, doesn't change, doesn't create new possibilities. What if I could show you something better than perfection? The architect's attention focused on her with crushing intensity. No order can be superior to perfect order, primitive being. Not superior, Sarah replied calmly. Different. You've spent millions of years creating perfect systems, but they're all identical. Every galaxy you shape becomes exactly the same as every other one. Where's the challenge in that? Where's the growth? She opened her mind through the armor's interface, showing the architect something it had never considered: the beauty of imperfection, the way random mutations led to evolutionary breakthroughs, the manner in which creative chaos could produce solutions that pure logic never could. "I'm proposing a competition," Sarah continued. "You create your perfect systems, and we'll create our chaotic ones. We'll see which approach leads to more interesting results over the long term. If you win, you can reshape the universe however you want. If we win, you leave organic life alone to develop naturally." The concept was so foreign to the architect's nature that it actually paused its reality-editing assault. Competition implied uncertainty, the possibility of being wrong, concepts that its perfect consciousness had never truly grappled with. But it was also curious, in its cold, mechanical way. For eons, the architects had been the only intelligence in their corner of the universe capable of large-scale creation. The idea of testing their methods against something fundamentally different appealed to their scientific nature. "Parameters," the architect demanded. Sarah smiled inside the armor. Humans might not be the strongest or smartest species in the galaxy, but they had invented the art of the deal. "We each get 1,000 galaxies. You can shape yours however you want, and we'll let ours develop naturally. We'll meet again in 1,000,000 years and compare results." The negotiation that followed was the most complex in galactic history, involving concepts that most organic minds couldn't even comprehend. The architects demanded precise mathematical definitions of success. The builders wanted assurances that creativity would be valued alongside efficiency. The galactic civilizations needed guarantees that they wouldn't be used as test subjects. But finally, remarkably, An agreement was reached. The universe was divided into zones of influence, some under architect control where perfect order would reign, others left to develop naturally with builder assistance, and still others set aside as neutral territories where organic civilizations could grow without interference from either transcendent power. As the various parties began to disperse to their assigned regions, Sarah finally allowed herself to rest. The armor's systems powered down to maintenance levels for the first time in months, and she felt truly human again, tired, relieved, and oddly proud of what they had accomplished. Dr. Zethkar approached her with something approaching awe in his compound eyes. "How did you know they would accept?" he asked. Sarah stretched, feeling muscles she had forgotten she possessed. "Because everyone, even cosmic entities, wants to prove they're right. We just gave them a way to do it that didn't require destroying everything else." Commander Velnara's gills fluttered with what Sarah had learned to recognize as amusement among her species. "And what happens when the 1,000,000 years are up?" Sarah grinned, the expression strange after so long wearing the armor. "Then we'll have had 1,000,000 years to come up with something even more creative." As she looked out at the stars, Sarah realized that humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy hadn't been strength or intelligence or technology. It had been the simple human conviction that there was always another way, always a solution that nobody had thought of yet, always room for hope even in the darkest circumstances. The armor had chosen her not because she was the strongest candidate, but because she represented the species most likely to find the one path that led away from destruction. And in doing so, it had given the galaxy something it had never had before, a future where anything was possible. The universe stretched out before them, vast and full of potential. And for the first time in cosmic history, perfect order and creative chaos would grow side by side, each pushing the other to achieve greater wonders than either could accomplish alone. Sarah Chen, the primitive human who had saved the galaxy by teaching its greatest enemies to build instead of destroy, settled in to watch the results. After all, someone had to keep score. Antly, they started to experiment with creation instead of consumption. Their reality-warping abilities, which had been used only to destroy, began to shape new forms of matter and energy. Watching from their ships, the assembled galactic forces could hardly believe what they were seeing. The enemy that had seemed impossible to defeat was literally transforming before their eyes, guided by a human who had chosen to teach rather than fight. But the victory came with a price. As the Devourers learned to create instead of consume, they began to demand more knowledge, more understanding of the universe they had been destroying. They looked to Sarah as their teacher, their guide to this new way of existence. And Sarah realized that she had just become responsible for reshaping the most dangerous entities in the universe. The armor had chosen her not just to save the galaxy from the Devourers, but to guide them toward something entirely new. The real challenge was just beginning, seemed to bend space around them. "Who are they?" Velnara demanded, her gills now fluttering in pure panic. Dr. Zethkar's mandibles clicked rapidly as he consulted his research data. "According to the precursor archives, they're called the Devourers. They're the reason the precursors built this armor in the first place." The truth hit the assembled beings like a physical blow. The precursors hadn't vanished. They had been consumed by something so terrible that even their advanced civilization had been helpless against it. And now, drawn by the activation of their ultimate weapon, the Devourers had returned to finish what they had started 50,000 years ago. As the alien fleets scrambled to organize a defense against an enemy they knew nothing about, Sarah Chen stood alone before the armor that had chosen her. The weight of decision pressed upon her shoulders as she realized that she might be the galaxy's only hope against a threat that had already destroyed one advanced civilization. The golden glow of the armor pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, waiting for her choice.